We're good.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Carrie Hearn. I'm with the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, and this is a webinar on the Virginia SolTax model. This is really meant for localities and utility scale solar stakeholders across Virginia. And this webinar is being hosted in conjunction between DMME and the University of Virginia's Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service through their Energy Transition Initiative. And we're going to go through a few housekeeping rules to start and orient you to the WebEx platform. This presentation is being recorded, and we ask for you to keep your microphone muted and use the Q&A box to ask your questions. We will hold a moderated question and answer session at the end of the presentation, and we'll have a few opportunities for Q&A throughout the live demo. And any unanswered questions will be answered in the coming week. We have our contact information at the end, and you're welcome to reach out anytime. So first of all, in terms of the WebEx platform, at the bottom of your screen, sometimes it's at the top, you'll see a menu bar where there's a mute or unmute button and where you can also start or stop your video. If you look at the little person icon, that's where you can click to see who is attending the webinar, as well as a button for the chat. The chat has a feature where you can send comments to the participants and the attendees, but for questions, we ask that you submit those in the Q&A. So you'll click the three little buttons and open the Q&A box to ask questions for the Q&A session. You can also raise your hand in the participant pane. There's a little hand icon. You can raise it, and then if you're done asking that question, you can click it again to lower your hand. So again, my name is Carrie Hearn. In my previous role, I was the solar program manager at the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy. I'm actually now in a new position as Associate Director of Energy Equity Programs. Alongside myself, we have Elizabeth Marshall from the UVA Energy Transition Initiative, and we also have Robert Crockett with Advantage Strategies. Thomas Callan, who's a student, has been working hard on developing the Virginia SolTax model. Thomas is with UVA, and Todd Flowers is with Dominion Energy, and we'll have a chance for them all to speak during the webinar. So a bit of background in terms of what prompted us to invest in this tool. Solar is clearly a growing technology and energy form in Virginia. It's a clean energy option, of course, that will help us meet our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. And there's a huge increased market demand from buyers, especially corporate buyers. Rapidly falling costs are another contributor to the growth in the solar market. And in terms of utility scale solar, we have economies of scale in terms of lower costs for the amount of clean energy that can be produced for the cost. There's also, of course, recent legislation and prioritization that has been given to renewable energy across the Commonwealth. Executive Order 43, for example, with Governor Ralph Northam. We have the Virginia Clean Economy Act and more. And you can look to the summer webinar series that DMME hosted in 2020 for much more information about all of that. And our partnership between DMME and UVA is really based around the fact that we share a mission to provide technical assistance to localities and other stakeholders to ensure that our clean energy goals can be met, that we're reducing barriers for solar development while also addressing some of the emerging questions. So about the Virginia SolTax model, it was developed last year between UVA and DMME, and we did receive broad input from many stakeholders across the Commonwealth that brought different perspectives to the tool. It really is aimed to help localities to make informed decisions in preparation for utility scale solar developments that will be happening in their jurisdiction, especially if they're in rural areas that have open access to land. The tool uses publicly available yet highly complex tax and finance data. For example, it uses local machinery and tools tax rates that are imported through the Weldon Cooper Center at UVA based on the surveys that they conduct across every single jurisdiction, pulling in that jurisdiction's unique tax rate. It also uses the most current State Corporation Commission depreciation schedule and other pieces of information that are publicly available, yet together they're very complex. And so we wanted to create a user-friendly opportunity for county administrators and others in localities to create scenarios, to provide information during their public forums, and other ways to look at this information in a comprehensive manner. So I'd like to ask Robert Crockett to introduce himself and talk a little bit about their role in the process. Robert?
Yeah, so good morning, Carrie. Good morning, everybody. First, Robert Crockett, I work for Advantage Strategies. We represent the Rural Solar Development Coalition, which is a collection of about 17 rural counties extending from the northern neck to the North Carolina-Virginia line. And we provide advocacy and support on solar matters to these localities. The counties that comprise the RSDC have ample land and are, based on what we've seen since the Clean Economy Act was approved and implemented, receiving a great deal of interest from solar developers. So a quick thanks to Carrie, to UVA for allowing the group an opportunity to provide input very early in the process. They were incredibly tolerant with us to make sure that as we looked at the tool, it really provided value to the localities, and we believe it does. We've been impressed with the thought and the care that's gone into the product. So as a group, we believe the tool will provide helpful information to counties that are and will be making significant land use decisions as it relates to solar. So every piece of information, as you guys know, will provide guidance to the decision makers responsible for making those decisions. So anyway, on behalf of the counties, the RSDC, Carrie, Elizabeth, everybody, we appreciate your time and attention to the product and for allowing us to contribute. So thanks. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So as we go into talking about the nuances of the tool, I felt really compelled to put out a disclaimer that the model and the information provided during this webinar does not constitute legal advice, and it is complex, and so there may be pieces of information that you want to look very closely at. It's not intended to demonstrate the complete long-term economic impact that solar development may contribute to a locality. So for example, this tool does not bring in other components such as siting agreement negotiations or other components that may not fall into the scope of the tax regime. This model is simply one reference tool to use when determining which tax regime a locality could apply for utility scale solar projects or other solar related decisions. And if you want to enact the revenue share or energy tax option, which we'll talk about in a little bit, an ordinance must be passed to apply that revenue share option across your locality. So just a few disclaimers there. So what are the two options? The conventional default option that is, across the Virginia landscape currently is depending on what size of solar system is being assessed, it either falls to the local machinery and tools tax option at 25 megawatts and less, or if it's over 25 megawatts, it then flips to the real estate tax rate that then brings in the State Corporation Commission's depreciation schedule. And further, in 2020, there were updates to the machinery and tools tax percentages, and the step down model is here before you on the screen. So the other option that was introduced as an alternative to this conventional first option is alternative option that is either called a revenue share option or an energy tax. It has, like I said, it has to be enacted through a local ordinance, and it is an assessment of up to $1,400 per megawatt of nameplate capacity per year. So again, this is an alternative. It would not be applied in addition. It is a separate option, and the details of that were laid out in House Bill 1131 and Senate Bill 762 in 2020. I'm going to have, Thomas explore more of the details when he gets into the live demonstration of the tool, but we wanted to lay out some of the specifics of the machinery and tools tax or the real estate rate. I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on this. We put this in here for you to review at your own pace after the webinar. But there's a lot of different components that need to be taken into consideration, and different depreciation schedules. The local composite index is indirectly affected through the machinery and tools or real estate tax rate. And then on the revenue share side, again, there's an indirect effect on the local composite index. So these are the details of each. I'm going to go back to the previous slide and see some of the specifics here. And then on the revenue share. And again, the revenue share option must be adopted by ordinance. It would be future oriented in terms of applying to new projects that are coming into a locality. So it is not retroactive. And that $1,400 per megawatt, that is the maximum as of now. This would apply to projects that are larger than 5 megawatts. A locality could choose to enact a smaller dollar amount, but the $1,400 is the max. And the tool takes into all of these considerations into the assumptions and how the model is working. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth Marshall at UVA, and she's going to pick it up from here.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So given the complexity of the choices that Carrie just laid out and the non-trivial nature of the calculations involved, we suspected that localities across Virginia would benefit from a computational tool that could provide them with unbiased and reliable data to inform their conversations and the decision-making process. And so we partnered with DMME, created a pitch, and we tested our idea with several localities and VACO. We received really encouraging feedback that a tool of this nature would be helpful. And so we embarked on a process to develop and deliver the SolTax tool. We started with the legislation and of course the Weldon Cooper Center's tax survey data that we have. And then through a stakeholder engaged process, in an iterative way, we developed a prototype and furthered it along to the point where we engaged in beta testing. And so in front of you, you'll see the list of stakeholders who are really instrumental in contributing to the development of the tool and making sure that we got it right, both from a value proposition perspective, but also from a technical perspective as well. You've already heard from Robert from Advantage Strategies. Sol UNESCO was integral in helping us understand the calculations, the local composite index, and things of that nature. And then, of course, we've got localities represented, such as the County of Halifax, and then regulatory, we've got SEC and Dominion reviewed the tool and provided us feedback, and we worked with them to make sure that everything was on point from their perspective as well. So you can see on the screen here, there's a link that I guess that'll be helpful down the road if you're looking back at the slides. But if you want to find a link to the tool, you can go to the Energy Transition Initiative's website at UVA, which is energytransition@coopercenter.org, or Google for it. You'll find it that way. Let's see. And so I'm going to, I guess, let's go to the next slide. We're getting to that point where we're ready to dive into the live demonstration, which Thomas Callan, he was our lead developer on the tool. He will lead you through the live demonstration. But before we do that, I want to give a high-level overview of how the tool is set up, conceptually how it works, just so you're oriented as you go into the live demonstration. So basically, a user will create a user profile. That profile is linked to a locality, and then all of that locality specific data, their tax rates, et cetera, will be imported in. So you can only have one locality affiliated with a profile, but you can create as many profiles as you need in order to evaluate projects in different localities, if you like. All of the project parameters are customizable. So tax rate, if that information gets updated before we push it through, you can update some of that information as well. Basically, you'll go in and you'll create project scenarios for future or hypothetical projects. And then together you can build a set or a portfolio of projects. You can evaluate the revenue share versus the M&T/real estate tax rate, expected revenue on a project by project basis. But then, as Thomas will show you, you can also look at it portfolio wide, which may be helpful for your locality if you're contemplating adopting a revenue share ordinance and you have some idea of what kind of projects you might expect over the next 30 to 40 years. Once you enter in all the data, the computational tool calculates expected revenues, but it also graphs it as a line plot of nominal cash flows. And then you'll also see there's a chart provided that'll show you year by year what your expected revenues could be. And so with that, I think I'll turn it over to Thomas to begin the live demonstration.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then you can start sharing yours, Thomas.
All right, sounds good.
So Thomas, I passed you the presenter. There you go.
Yep. And I'm guessing you guys can all see this now.
Yes, it's starting to load.
All right. All right. I'm Thomas. I'm a third-year computer science student at University of Virginia. So to start with, I'll be going over the homepage of the website, which pretty much lays out some of the topics we've already discussed and goes into a bit greater detail. And it describes both the tax model, the parameters that are used, and any assumptions we make. And then I'll be moving into demoing both login and how more generally the tool works. So as we said, the current default tax rate is the M&T and real estate tax. And we're calling it this because depending on the parameters of the project, the main tax that is being applied is either the M&T tax rate or the real estate rate. And we'll be getting into how that's decided a bit later. And then with the revenue share legislation, localities can now implement a revenue share of up to $1,400 per megawatt. And then down here in the stage section, we have just logging instructions. I'll come back to this a bit later, but feel free to look at that if you want. And then more generally for the M&T real estate tax model, the main parameters that are used are the total capitalized investment for the project, an exemption schedule, which may be applied for a project. And this is the M&T step down of the 80, 70, 60% that Carrie mentioned earlier. The depreciation schedule that is used, which is either the SCC or the locality. And that's dependent on a few variables, the size of the solar project in megawatts, and then the local M&T and the local real estate tax rates are very important as well. And so due to the complexities of the M&T and real estate tax model, there are three main ways that a solar facility can be taxed under this model. And these methods are determined by the project size in megawatts and if an electric supplier, electric company, or electric co-op is operating the facility. And I'll just be referring to this group as an electric supplier in general. And so the three methods are categorized as if a project is less than 25 megawatts or less and it's not owned by an electric supplier, then the M&T step down is applied, the M&T tax rate is applied, and the local depreciation schedule is applied. If a project is greater than 25 megawatts and less than 150 megawatts, or any project that is less than 150 megawatts and is owned by an electric supplier, then the real estate tax rate is used, the FCC depreciation schedule is used, and the M&T step down is used. And then any project, no matter who it's owned by, that is greater than 150 megawatts or greater, the real estate tax rate and the SEC depreciation schedule are used. However, there is no tax exemption applied on these projects. And we can see we have links on the site for where this information is coming from within the code of Virginia's legislature. And we also have a chart further down here which describes, which breaks down these differences in how M&T and real estate tax rate can be applied depending on the different variables, just to give you a visual reference of what's going on. And then so for the revenue share model, as I've said before, it's a flat rate of up to $1,400 per megawatt on solar projects, and this provides 100% tax exemption otherwise, but besides that payment in exchange for the revenue share. And adopting this revenue share will apply it to all future solar projects in the locality that it's adopted. So, and that means there's no like picking or choosing which projects can adopt the revenue share and which ones can be used for the M&T and real estate rate. It's the adopting the ordinance applies across the entire locality. And so for computing the cash flows under the two models, to start with the M&T, the tool that will prompt the user for, or you guys, for 7 pieces of information. And these are the initial year the solar project will operate in, the total capitalized investment into the solar project, the size of the project in megawatts, total acreage of the project, the acreage of the project that's considered inside the fence, and then the land, the value of the land. This includes a baseline value and the value of land inside the fence and the value of land outside the fence. And then it's also going to ask whether the project is owned by an electric supplier. So all those need to enter into the tool yourself. And then all of these down here are already preloaded into your account when you select a locality to base it off of. However, these are customizable within your user profile as well. And these include the revenue share rate, the M&T tax rate, the real estate rate, the assessment ratio, the locality depreciation schedule, the SEC depreciation schedule, and then a discount rate to calculate the net present value of all the revenue from the projects. And as I said, these can be changed by yourself at any point throughout when you're using the app. So effectively, when these parameters are passed in, the M&T tax rate is calculated by just taking the project assessed value times the assessment ratio times the 1 minus the exemption rate times the depreciation value times the M&T tax rate. And then the revenue share calculations are very straightforward. It's just the revenue share rate times the size of the solar project in megawatts. And then for both of these M&T and real estate tax rates and the revenue share rate, the SolTax model also includes revenue that would be gained from land and the increase in value in land. So that's involved in the in the revenue that's displayed on the screen. And then also the Composite Index, which is used to help determine how much money a locality must contribute to education funding, is discounted or removed from the potential revenues if there is when there is an increase. And we subtract that just from the revenue from land and from the tax model that is used. And for the Composite Index, some of the variables that are used and are also already preloaded into your account are the baseline true value of the locality, adjusted gross income, taxable retail sales, population, the average daily student membership, and then required local matching, which is a sum of the required local effort of the standards of quality and the required local matching for incentive and lottery accounts for your locality. And
So Thomas, I think we can pause there for just a moment. We
Okay,
do have
yeah.
a question, and it came in through the Q&A. So, Jordan, could you actually make Francis Hotzel or unmute him? So Francis, I'm going to ask you to ask your question, and then we can look at it again when we get into the tool itself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you all for doing this. I think this is super helpful for many reasons. But so I ran our model alongside your model, and there's a little bit difference because we're assuming that the escalator is going to be included going forward. But looking at year one, I came up with the same numbers essentially for revenue share, and this is Lunenburg County, by the way, where we've got an active project and we're looking at the math. And but I came up with more value, more revenue in year one under M&T. I'm looking at all your inputs; they're the same as our inputs, same data. So I just wanted to confirm, because the way you've worded the composite index language, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the model right now, but is the only reduction to the revenues being shown in the results the composite index reduction, or the fact that some of the money that's being paid to the county is going to fund the educational budget? Is that the only reduction in the model?
Yes, that's the only thing that's being subtracted from any revenue that's calculated.
Okay. Well, again, your model shows less revenue year one than our model, and I'd be happy to, I don't think we want to do this in this format, but be happy to spend some time just trying to figure out what that difference is.
Yeah, I'd be happy to sit down with you and look it over as well.
Okay, and then I think we had another question come in, and we can save some of these for the Q&A, but I just want to look at the questions and see if now is the right time to look at them. So Jamie Timberlake asks, how do you update the parameters? The tax rate and the reassessment cycle is not correct for the locality. So do you want to talk about the year that it's pulling in data from and what that process looks like?
Yeah, so I also see that he found the button to fix it, but I'll just discuss it more generally. Is that currently the data we have for the majority of localities, I think it's from 2019, and we're working right now on trying to update all of that data. But you can fix it for your user profile, as I'm guessing Jamie found, and I'll show later in the demonstration, but there's a button on your profile home screen that allows you to update the parameters. But currently, any user profile that is tied to that locality with outdated information would still have that outdated information until we update it on the back end of what the data for the locality is.
Okay, and then there's a question asking does the model assume that the entire property or land is reassessed, or does it assume that only the acreage within the project fence line is reassessed?
So we have the ability, so the model takes in, it has a baseline value and then an outside the fence land value. So it's kind of up to the locality how they enter that data in. If they put the baseline land value and the outside the fence land value is the same, then any value outside the fence wouldn't really be reassessed at all. However, that value increases or decreases from some reason, then it would be assuming that the entire project is being reassessed.
Okay, and then we have a comment that says the revenue share does not affect composite index since it is not a property-based tax, but the composite index affects the machinery and tools tax because it is property-based. So let's take that into consideration. But any initial response from anyone?
I was not aware of that. but if it is the case, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the composite index. You have the ability to remove that calculation. So if you want to get the revenue under both tax models without the composite index, there's a button that I can show you to turn it off for your user profile to remove that from both of the M&T and revenue share tax models.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and move into the next phase of the demo, Thomas, and then we'll continue to take Q&A as it comes up.
Yep. So I'm going to go over the creating a new account feature, or just creating a new account. So to do so, just click create new account in the top right here. And for your username, especially if you think you're going to be connecting to, or you're going to have multiple users for different localities, we suggest like just putting like an underscore and then the locality after the underscore after your username. And for this demonstration, I'll be using data from Halifax because I've worked with Scott Simpson on just talking with him for some realistic models with 2 examples of solar facilities that they've been have developed and are developing in Halifax currently. And then we'll just continue to doing.
And so as Thomas puts this in, just a reminder that, you know, the model is going to be forward looking, but in this scenario that Thomas is using, he's basing it on realistic scenarios. So just that distinction. Okay.
And then after you put in your account information, you're going to be choosing the locality to connect your account with. And since I said I was doing Halifax, you can just search up your locality right here and it should show up. And then click continue. And then this is our home page for a user profile. So right here we have all the parameters that are preloaded in that are based off of your locality you've chosen. And you can update any of these parameters using this update user parameters button here. And you can change any of them that you want down here. And the composite index, to turn that off, is to just uncheck this box right here. And so to start with, I'll be doing a 80 megawatt project. And to create a new analysis, you just click this create or generate new project analysis button. And then I'll take you to this form to fill out. And I'll name it Alpha. It's going to start in 2021. It has a project length of 35 years. It has a total capitalized investment of 160 million. It's as I said, it's an 80 megawatt project. And so this project is on 1,000 acres with 800 of them being considered inside the fence, a baseline true value of 2,800, and outside the fence of 2,800, and inside the fence of 10,000. And so I know some localities consider the value of the inside the fence and outside the fence value of the land the same. So to get around this, you can just enter the value of whatever you're valuing the land at after the solar facility is on there as the same number. So you could put, I'll put like 7,000 into both of these if that's how your locality determines the value of the land. And then we also have a checkbox down here to say if the project is operated by electric supplier, and this one was. So we're going to come from here and click this generate model button. And then this takes us to an analysis page, which you've seen some of from Elizabeth's slide earlier. And so on the left-hand side here, we have a summary of all the data that you put in for the project analysis. And one note here is that the line highlighted in green between the real estate rate and the M&T tax rate is a tax rate that's applied for this project based off of the parameters that we discussed earlier. Because this project is 80 megawatts, we use the real estate tax rate, and that's highlighted in green. And we'll see in our next example that the M&T tax rate is going to be highlighted because it's less than 25 megawatts. And then on the top right here, we have a summary of the total expected revenue under both the revenue share and the real estate tax rate, and then an increase the value of the increase in revenue from the revenue share. And all of this is in 2020 dollars, and it's discounted at 6% per year. And then we have a line plot that's showing all the cash flows each year for the life of the project. And then further down, we have a year-by-year breakdown of the expected revenue, both in nominal dollars and in discounted 2020 dollars. And if we scroll all the way down, we have totals under each model, both and in nominal values and again in 2020 dollars. And these dollar amounts in 2020 dollars match up with the values that are displayed up at the top right hand corner, or top right here. So I'll stop for a second, see if there's any questions about this page at all, and if not, I'll move on to a second example.
Thomas, will you touch on how they can print this or capture this information if they want to share it?
Yeah, so we have this little PDF button up here, and this is just going to take us to a print page, and you can either save this as a PDF normally, or you could print this as it is. And we have the split down of how it's just everything on this page is described, and it's able to be saved as a PDF or be printed as it is. And then we also have a PDF button on the locality homepage, or the user profile homepage, which will provide a PDF of the summary and the total expected revenue for the locality, and a summary of all the analyses that have been made for that locality, or for that user profile.
All right, let's see what it looks like when we add another scenario.
All right, so I'm going to go back to the user homepage by clicking the button up here, and we now see that there's a summary of the project that we've already created with some of the values that we've entered, including the revenue shares, the revenue share revenue, and the revenue for the M&T tax rate, and also an overall summary of all the analyses that we've provided so far. So we'll create a new one, and this one we will call beta. This one's also 35 years in project length. It has a total capitalized investment of 14 million. It's a project size of 20 megawatts. The total acreage is 220 acres with inside the fence of 110. The baseline value is 2,000, and the outside the fence is the same. And then the inside the fence land value stays the same at 10,000. And so this project is operated privately. So we're going to uncheck this box and then generate the model for this. And as we see, as I said before, the M&T tax rate is highlighted because it's less than 20 megawatts and it is privately owned. And as before, the total expected revenue under both models is displayed in the top right, with the increase from revenue share, and then a line graph showing over time how those values change. And again, down here at the bottom, just a table showing the year-by-year breakdown with the totals at the bottom as well.
Okay, we had a question come in asking about projects that are less than 5 megawatts. And then he says, or is the only option for municipalities the conventional option, local machinery and tools tax?
Well, because the revenue share cuts off at 5 megawatts and it's up to localities under that, the model doesn't really take into account any project that's less than 5 megawatts.
Okay, and then I think you have a third scenario.
Yep, and so this third scenario isn't one that is actually being built in Halifax, but we use the data from the alpha example, and we scaled it up to the correct number, or to generally the same numbers for this example. So we're going to name this one Gamma with a same project of 35 years. So we're going to put this project size at 200 megawatts and 400,000 total capitalized investment, with a total acreage of 2,500 and inside the fence of 2,000. And the baseline true values are the same from the first example, so 2,800 for baseline and outside the fence.
Thomas, say your, sorry, Thomas, say your total capitalized investment number again.
Oh, it's 400 million.
Thank you.
Yep. And then inside the fence land value is 10,000 again, and this is operated by an electric supplier. So keep this box checked, and we'll generate the model. And in this example, again, the real property tax is being used, the real estate tax is being used. However, on the right, we can see that the M&T tax rate is much higher than the revenue share rate, and this is mainly due because over 150 megawatts and over, the M&T tax rate no longer uses the exemption schedule. So more of the solar facility is now being taxed, leading to the higher revenue from the M&T tax rate. And again, we have the year-by-year breakdown with the totals at the bottom. Yeah, if anyone has any questions about any of the three pages I've shown, feel free to put them in the Q&A.
So then you can go back to the locality, let's see kind of their homepage.
Yep.
Because it does aggregate it together.
So as we can see here, the total, it calculates the total revenue share from each project, total M&T from each project, and then the total increase expected from the revenue share for each project. And because this gamma 1 is weighing so heavily, we see that for this user profile, it's expecting that the revenue from revenue share would not meet that for the M&T tax rate. And also, as I stated before, there's this PDF button for the locality page, and it just gives us breakdown of what's on this page as well as the parameters that are being used for this page.
Great. Okay, we have two questions, and then I want to flip over to Todd to kind of share what's happening in the current legislative session regarding, you know, the section of this code. So before we do that, two questions. So what about a project that is sized exactly 5 megawatts? Which category is it in? And I don't know, I'd have to check the legal language. Todd, do you happen to know which regime it falls under?
Carrie, I don't recall, but I think it would be an easy read of the legislation to determine where it would fall.
Yeah, yeah. Thomas, do you remember what is the cutoff, 4.999 or is it 5.0?
I'm not sure. I think it might be 5 megawatts and greater, but I don't want to say for sure which one it is.
It's greater than 5.
Okay. And then we have another question. Once the revenue share is, oops, I just lost it. Once the revenue share, sorry, the screen doesn't stay open. Okay, once revenue share is adopted by the locality, all projects greater than 5 megawatts must participate in revenue share. So yes, if a revenue share ordinance is passed, that is the tax model that applies across the locality for all applications that come in, fall within that size range. And locality can always change their ordinance. But yes, it is applying across the jurisdiction. Okay, we have another question. Private owners are also included within the definition of electric suppliers. All electric suppliers are taxed at the real estate tax rate. So Chip Dix, let's make sure that we chat after the webinar and get some of the legal interpretation. So appreciate that. Okay, so this model would not help with small single homeowners projects. that is not the intention of this tool. This tool is primarily meant for utility scale solar projects, 5 megawatts and greater, and for really localities as the end user. But yeah, this is not meant for behind the meter, residential projects, for example. Okay, so Thomas, thank you very much.
Can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
So we have this questions and feedback button up at the top right here. If you just click on it, you can put in your email and any message you have, and then Carrie, Elizabeth, and I will receive that message at 3 p.m. each day. We receive an email each day containing all the messages from the past 24 hours, and we receive that at 3 p.m. So it's almost live, but we just didn't want to be spammed by emails if someone did just decide to, is what the thinking behind that is. But we'll try and get back to you with any answering your question or just responding to your feedback at the earliest possible time if you send us anything. All right, thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, Thomas. Well done. So if you, stop sharing, then I'll start sharing mine again.
Yeah.
Okay, Jordan, let me know when I have access.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so what is next? Todd, over to you.
Great, thank you, Carrie, and good morning, everyone. We thought it might be a good idea, given that the General Assembly is currently in session, to highlight some proposed legislation, because if that legislation becomes law, it will prompt some changes to the SolTax model. So I wanted to highlight House Bill 2269. It was originally proposed by the House, and the delegate was Delegate Heretic out of the 79th District. He was the patron of the bill prior to a substitute that was provided. The proposal was initially developed by the Rural Solar Development Coalition, and in essence, what it would do, it would increase the maximum amount of revenue share over time. Originally, it was contemplated that this would be tied to CP&I, but given the complexity of tying it to that index, ultimately our legislatures elected to add a provision that the maximum amount under the revenue share may be increased on July 1 of 2026 and every 5 years thereafter by 10%. So in essence, the provisions under this legislation would allow for increases in revenue under the revenue share option should counties elect revenue share by ordinance. This has not yet been passed into law. It's still being debated by our legislature. It did make it out of the House prior to crossover earlier this month, and the Senate is now reviewing the legislation in the appropriate subcommittee. So it's something I think important for localities to track. Should this come into law, it will necessitate some changes to the modeling because it would increase the revenues under that revenue share provision. Carrie, maybe I'll turn it over to you to discuss next steps on how that would happen with the SolTax model.
Great, thank you so much, Todd. And I believe it's actually being discussed in Senate Finance Committee as we speak. And so that's, I believe Robert had to jump off the call for that specifically. So yes, in terms of next steps and how that impacts the model, we are monitoring these potential changes. If that were to be signed into law and adopted into the code, we would be looking at how that changes the model, developing the potential, changes in the coding of the model, and then that would go into effect July 1st. So we would do the development work the spring and then release it into the next iteration of the model when it goes into law. We're also in the process of collecting updated real estate tax rates and assessment ratio data and updating that for all localities. So as we mentioned earlier, and Thomas stated that the model is currently using 2019 data. Any locality can update that on their own by changing the parameters in their account. But we're also looking at that as a global update, and we'll continue to make sure that that gets updated over time. And then the same with the STC depreciation schedules. As those get released, we will receive those and we will update the tool accordingly. So in addition, you know, we're always interested in hearing your feedback, your input, and absolutely welcome setting up a meeting to discuss or receiving written feedback. You can send that into the tool feedback feature that Thomas just described, or you can email us directly. You know, feel free to propose upgrades. We've already been asked if the results could be exported into Excel, so that's something that we're taking into consideration. So with that, we will take some more questions, and we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of other projects that we're working on between DMME and UVA. I'll put up my contact and Elizabeth's contact here, but let's go back to questions. I'm actually going to pull up the participant pane so I can see if anyone has their hands raised. We can take you off of mute and you can ask your question verbally, or you can continue to put them into the Q&A. So let's go back to the Q&A and see what has come in. Okay, and I'm opening up the chat. The recording of the webinar and the slides will be posted and will be sent out to anyone registered registered for the webinar. So yes, you will receive a copy of all of this information and the recording. So someone says 2269 was just voted out of Senate Finance, uncontested. So we have live updates. Okay, and we're getting some good feedback about how the local composite index applies to the revenue share or not, saying that rather than giving users the ability to uncheck it, it would be great if it's only applied to M&T. Otherwise, to get the correct numbers, you know, you have to run the numbers twice, et cetera. So this is, you know, a great piece of feedback I think we're hearing from multiple users. So we will take a close look at that and make any required updates to the tool. So very much appreciate everyone's feedback on that. If anyone wants to take themselves off of mute and submit a verbal question or comment, please go ahead and raise your hand and we can see you that you have a question, and or even if you have comments about the tool in general, we'd just love to hear from folks.
Carrie, I think Daniel Foster has a question that he's been trying to send to the chat in the Q&A. Maybe I could just unmute.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yep. So Daniel, I just unmuted you if you'd like to ask just a verbal question.
And Daniel, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Scott Foster, in spite of my going by my first name via WebEx. Carrie, you just covered my comment, and I appreciate that, regarding solar revenue share being completely exempt from the local composite index. And rather than toggling it on and off for the entire calculation, if it could just be applied to M&T, that would make the final readout accurate, and you wouldn't have to run the numbers twice. But overall, it's an impressive program and great work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, we have a question. Are you aware of how many or which counties have adopted a local revenue share ordinance? So I actually don't have a complete count or a status on that question, but if there are any localities that are joining us today that have adopted or are in the process of considering adopting a revenue share ordinance, we would love to hear from you and to see if this tool is helpful for you in the process. And Robert Crockett with the Rural Solar Development Coalition may have a better sense of that as well. That's a question that we're also asking, and I will use that as an opportunity to plug a survey that we're working on. Okay, so Daniel Foster says Richmond County, or Scott Foster, excuse me, Richmond County, Greensville County, Mecklenburg County, and Charlotte County. So this is a good opportunity to plug a statewide solar survey that we're working on that will ask questions such as that to localities. This survey is really meant to help us help you. So for us to have a great, picture of the opportunities and challenges on the ground in terms of what localities are doing with solar development, ranging from small scale rooftop behind the meter solar systems and the permitting processes that are involved there, all the way up to utility scale solar pre-application meetings or other types of activities that are happening. If there are gaps in knowledge where you'd like to have more technical assistance or formal guidance to weigh in on your decisions. Obviously, the decisions first start with the localities, but that can be a heavy lift in some cases. And so we want to provide the tools to be helpful for localities to remove barriers or to ensure that the development of solar is happening in a smart and balanced and efficient way that has minimal impact on stakeholders or the landscape, et cetera. So look for a solar survey later this quarter. And we've appreciated, again, working with a broad group of stakeholders in the development of that survey. Putting up my contact here, and again, with Elizabeth as well. We appreciate everyone's participation in the webinar. I'm just going to look back to the chat and the Q&A to see if we have any other questions. Okay, seeing none, I think we're going to give you all a half hour back of your day. And again, appreciate everyone's participation, and please stay safe as weather patterns change and we continue to navigate the public health emergency that we're in. So wish you all very well and have a good day. Thank you. And Jordan, you can stop the recording.
All right.